Picture the first money. If you are imagining a silver coin with a king's face pressed into it, you have already skipped about 2,000 years. The first money did not clink, did not shine, and in many cases did not physically move. It was closer to a memory that two strangers could both take seriously, and that is far stranger than a coin. Most of us have absorbed a tidy story about how money began. Before money, people bartered. You had a goat, your neighbor had a pot, you swapped. Economists call it the double coincidence of wants. You each had to want exactly what the other offered at exactly the same time. It sounds logical. It also seems to have never been the main system anywhere. When anthropologists looked at small-scale societies without states, they did not find busy barter markets. They found favors, gifts, debts, and reputation. If a neighbor helped you repair a roof, you did not hand him 3 pots on the spot. You both remembered.
Maybe next season you gave him grain, or helped his brother haul stones. The community itself was the ledger. People had traded valuable things, cattle, salt, shells, metal, long before any city. But a valuable object is not automatically money. A cow is valuable, but it is a terrible unit of account. Cows age, they vary in size, and you cannot divide one without losing most of its use. Shells and metal can become money, but only when a society starts using them as a standard measure for everything else. That distinction matters. Money is not just something you can swap. It is a measuring system for value. That reputation system works beautifully in a tiny village where everyone knows you. But it fails precisely when a society becomes interesting, when there are too many people to remember, too many strangers, and too much stuff. And that is the moment the first money shows up. Farming made the problem worse.
A farmer's income arrives once a year at harvest, but a farmer's problems arrive all year round. Your roof gives out in summer. Your tools break in autumn. You need food before the grain is ready. In a small village, people can remember your promise. In a city of 10,000, you are just some person with an excuse. So if you want to locate the first money, do not look in a market. Look inside a temple. Around 5,000 years ago in southern Mesopotamia, in a city called Uruk, enormous temple complexes did more than worship. They collected, stored, and redistributed grain, wool, oil, and beer. A farmer brought his barley to the temple after harvest. The temple stored it in giant granaries. In return, the farmer received credit. That credit had to be recorded, because no priest could remember every deposit from every farmer. That is where money begins. The earliest written documents we have ever found are not poems, laws, or dynastic histories. They are accounting tablets. Before writing recorded stories, it recorded who owed what. One of the reasons writing may have developed at all was to keep track of economic obligations. The first money and the first writing are basically the same technology, a way to make memory permanent outside a human brain. Temple accountants used small clay tokens shaped like cones, spheres, and cylinders to stand for goods. A cone might represent a measure of barley. A sphere might represent a sheep. If you brought 10 measures of barley, you received tokens. Then at some point, someone pressed those tokens into a wet clay tablet, a mark instead of an object. That shift is enormous. The token became a symbol. The pile of barley became a number, and a number could be transferred, compared, and remembered. Money was not born when someone traded a goat. Money was born when someone wrote down an obligation. The unit they used was not a coin. It was called a shekel, and it originally meant a weight, about 1/3 of an ounce. The word itself comes from the idea of weighing. You did not carry shekels around in a pouch. You carried barley or silver, and the temple's scales told you how many shekels it was. A clay tablet might record a farmer owing 30 shekels of barley after the harvest. That sentence did the work of money. The barley itself was just the evidence. Here is the part most people never hear. Money appeared before coins. By the time the first coin was stamped, people had been using money for well over 2,000 years. They used units of account, recorded debts, and weighed silver. They did not have coins. They had clay, grain, and scales. Barley was the working-class money in ancient Mesopotamia. It was used for small purchases, daily rations, and wages. Silver was for larger things: land, legal fines, long-distance trade. They were convertible at a rate that changed with the harvest. So even in the very first monetary system, there were already exchange rates. Silver was not valuable because it was shiny. It was valuable because it was durable, divisible, portable, and impossible to fake easily. It came in lumps, rings, and coils. When you needed to pay someone, you might snap off a piece of a silver bracelet and place it on a merchant's scale. The merchant would weigh it against stone weights. That is slow and annoying, but it is also real money. A silver coil was not a coin. It was raw metal measured into money. That raises the central mystery of money. Why would a farmer accept silver at all? He could not eat it. He could not plant it. The answer is older and more cynical than you might expect, because the temple or palace would take it back. Mesopotamian institutions collected rents, tributes, and fees. If the temple demands silver for its grain loans or land rights, then suddenly every farmer needs silver. Once everyone needs silver to settle debts to the temple, everyone will accept silver for real work. The state's demand created universal demand. A farmer did not have to love silver. He just had to know that the temple would take it later. That agreement, not the metal, was the actual money. This is not some exotic ancient lesson. It is still how money works today. You accept dollars not because a dollar bill is physically useful, but because the government will accept them for taxes, and because enough other people believe the same thing. The first money was not a thing. It was a chain of promises with a number attached. By the time of the famous Code of Hammurabi in Babylon, money had become legal infrastructure. The code listed wages, prices, and fines in silver shekels. A doctor's fee, a builder's penalty, a debt. Once a number can be attached to them, they can be compared, regulated, and enforced. The state was not just using money. It was using money to define justice. That is a staggering amount of power to place in a unit of account. So if people already had silver money by weight, why did coins appear? Because scales were a pain. Imagine trying to buy a jar of beer in an ancient market. You would need to pull out a silver ring, maybe break off a shaving, watch the merchant weigh it, argue about the stone weights, and then check the purity. Every transaction was a small negotiation about what counted as money. That works for a temple accountant. It does not work for a busy market. Then, around 2,600 years ago, in a kingdom called Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, someone had a simple and brilliant idea: stamp the metal. Lydia had access to electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver. They began issuing small, standardized lumps marked with a lion or another official symbol. The stamp meant this is a known weight. The king or state guarantees it. You do not need to stop and weigh it. That invention was not the first money. It was branded money. A coin is a physical piece of trust. The metal still had value, but the stamp made it convenient. Kings later put their own faces on coins for a very practical reason. It was not only ego, it was a warranty. If someone cheated on the weight, the king's reputation was at stake. The face on the coin was basically an ancient customer service department. One likely reason coins spread so quickly is that armies needed them. Soldiers are mobile, often far from home, and need to carry wealth that is compact and immediately accepted. A soldier paid in stamped coins could spend them without a scale. If a king paid soldiers in coins and then demanded taxes in coins, the whole economy got pulled into coinage. That theory is not universally accepted, but it explains the speed of the spread. China developed its own coinage independently, using bronze imitations of cowrie shells and later round coins with square holes. Same principle, a small, standardized token guaranteed by authority. Coins made money faster, more portable, and more accessible. They meant a transaction could happen without a scribe, a temple, or a set of scales. But the underlying technology did not change. A coin is still a memory made portable. It says someone somewhere owes something, and we have agreed to treat this small metal disc as that debt. Centuries later, paper money in China made the abstraction even more visible. A paper note has almost no physical value. It is a receipt. It works because people trust the issuer. That is not a modern trick. It is the same clay tablet logic, waiting for a lighter material. There is a famous example that makes the whole thing visible. On the island of Yap in the Pacific, people used massive stone discs called rai as money. Some were so large they could not be moved. People simply remembered who owned which stone. In one often told story, an enormous rai stone fell into the sea during a shipwreck or storm. It sank. Nobody could see it. But the islanders knew it existed, and they knew who owned it, so they kept trading it. An invisible stone at the bottom of the ocean was still money. That sounds absurd only if you think money is the object. It is not. The Yapese stone and the Mesopotamian clay tablet are doing exactly the same thing. They are external memory. Money is a group agreement about who owes what, stored in something that can be remembered, counted, and transferred. The first money appeared the moment a community grew too large to remember every debt personally. A farmer and a temple needed a way to track value across seasons and between strangers. They invented a unit of account, the shekel, and recorded it on clay. The clay itself was not valuable. The barley and silver behind it were. But the money was the agreement. That is also why modern money is mostly invisible. Most money is not cash. It is an entry in a bank ledger, a number on a screen, a promise nested inside other promises. You swipe a card and nothing physical leaves your hand. That is not a new kind of money. It is a return to how money started, pure record keeping. When people say money became more abstract over time, from coins to paper to digital, they have the story backwards. The first money was already the most abstract version. It was a number in a ledger. Coins made the idea physical. Paper made it convenient. Digital money simply removed the physical part again. If you go back far enough, the first money was not a discovery like fire or bronze. It was more like the invention of a language. Once people could say, this is worth that, they could store work, move value across time, and cooperate with strangers. They could also go into debt, which created new forms of power and misery. But that is another story. The central thing to remember is this: coins are not the beginning of money. They are a late chapter. The real beginning happened in a dusty temple storehouse, when someone pressed a mark into clay, and two people agreed that a number was real. Everything since, coins, paper, banks, payment apps, is just a faster way of saying the same thing. I owe you.